Welcome to another edition of Draft Season. It is draft season. Tony Pauline, John Schmelk with you. By the time this airs, Tony and I will probably be on flights to Indianapolis next week, getting ready for the NFL Combine. We'll talk about a couple format changes with the two, by the way, and then we'll talk about maybe some snubs, and we'll talk about by position, some guys that might shine, it's really important for, other guys that maybe you worry about. We'll get through all that right here on draft season leading up to our Combine and our Combine preview. Tony, how are you, man?
Okay, I survived my first mock draft. I figured there'd be people outside my house with pitchforks and torches. That didn't happen, so I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah, I showed up and nobody else was there, so I went home.
There you go. I have to say, we are recording this podcast on the 48th anniversary of the release of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. So this is a great day.
Yes, clearly the most important thing. So we must bring up at the start of the podcast. All right. So by the way, we are recording this last Friday. You'll be hearing this early next week. So if something happens over the weekend and we don't talk about it, we're not idiots. That's just because we already recorded it, because like I said, we'll be flying on Monday. So we wanted to get this in the bag so you guys can talk about it. And also, by the way, we got some questions from our great listeners and viewers and fans on Twitter, and we will ask those to Tony at the end of the program at time permitting. All right, Tony, let's start here. Format changes. They famously went to prime time last year. The players hated it. Some guys didn't work out. The guys that did were like, dude, we're tired, man. We've been in medicals all day, meetings, and it's 8 o'clock and I got to run a 40-yard dash. It's killing me. And now all of a sudden the workouts are back to 3 o'clock in the afternoon most days. I guess that was something that they kind of went back and forth on a little bit, huh?
I mean, obviously, as I've said for a couple of years now, I mean, the NFL is looking to commercialize, monetize the combine as best they could. And what greater way to do it than have the quarterbacks throw at 8 p.m. at night, right? I will tell you, the big change for me is the schedule, in the sense that traditionally the offensive linemen went first, then the tight ends, then the quarterbacks with the receivers, the running backs, and then it was defensive linemen, inside linebackers, and the last day was always the defensive backs. Now it's the last day is actually the offensive lineman. And it's kind of interesting. I was talking to somebody about this. Back when they had that old schedule, what would happen is they would have a bunch of quarterbacks designated as practice quarterbacks. And the practice quarterbacks would not only participate in the quarterback workout, but they would throw a day earlier to the tight ends. And they would stick around on Mondays to throw to the the third day to throw to the linebackers, and the last day to throw the defensive backs. And you say, what's the big deal? A lot of quarterbacks, a lot of practice quarterbacks actually made money and helped their draft stock, because offensive coaches would stick around and watch them throw to the defensive backs.
By the way, Tony, just historically, Tony Romo was one of those guys back in the day.
Josh McCown. Yeah. Josh McCown. I'll never forget being at the workout when Josh McCown was there. And a guy by the name of Paul Hackett was sticking around to watch him, even though the rest of his group left 2 days earlier, because Josh McCown, the last day of the combine, was throwing 60-yard bombs down the field with speed in defensive back workouts and basically hitting the mark. And, it's kind of, obviously it's being done for commercialization and TV, but, it's not, and it's getting further and further away from the pure scouting event that many of us knew it to be 20 years ago. That's just another example.
Got it. All right. Yeah. And I agree. And by the way, just so people understand, it's DBs first. So corners and safeties, they're going to be the first day of interviews and workouts. Then you get to, I believe, linebackers and defensive linemen. Then wide receivers and quarterbacks will work out on Saturday. And then Sunday workouts will be offensive linemen and running backs, just so people understand what the schedule is. And of course, we'll have all that coverage right here on draft season. And of course, if you check it out, Big Blue Kickoff Live, if you're a Giants fan, Giants Huddle podcast, make sure you guys go check that out. We'll have coverage all week long from Radio Road to Combine. And Tony might appear on one of those shows as well. So make sure you go check that out. All right. So let's go to number 2 before we start getting to position by position here, Tony. Who isn't in Indy that you raised your eyebrows and like, man, that guy, he should be there? What are they doing?
There's not a huge number of snubs. I mean, there's no glaring snubs. None of the guys who are not going to the combine are going to surprise and be third-round picks, fourth-round picks.
Now, usually there's like 20 to 30 guys every year that get drafted but were not invited to the combine, or less?
I think it's a little bit higher than that. I think it's more in the 40 range. But still, I mean, it's not a situation where a guy's going to be selected in round 3 or round 4. You'd be like, wow, that guy wasn't even invited to the combine. How did he sneak up? People talk about Carl Brooks of Bowling Green. Carl Brooks has been one of my favorites the past 3 years. In order for Carl Brooks to be invited, that means someone else is not going to be invited. You're going to kick somebody off the invitation list. Who are you kicking off? I mean, that was an interesting one.
And by the way, Tony, real quick, I don't think we've talked about him. Tell the people about Carl Brooks real quick.
Carl Brooks is a quick, explosive defensive lineman. He can play end in a 4-man line. He can play inside in a 4-man, end in a 3-man line, end in a 4-man line. He's very athletic. Came into the season with very low grades from scouts, even though he's been incredibly productive at Bowling Green. A guy who's a gap penetrator, good change of direction. Maybe he plays a 3-technique type of style, although he is more than a 3-technique type of lineman. I guess it would have been nice to see him there. I'm just not over the moon that it was a major snub for the combine. I thought Kazmir Allen of UCLA, especially after the way he played the Shrine game, I thought it was interesting that he didn't get an invite. I think it's interesting he didn't get an invite because
what position, Tony?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Some scouts like him at running back. Some scouts like him at wide receiver. He played both at the Shrine game, and as we've seen at the combine, there were alternate position drills. So I don't know whether they would have kept Kazmir Allen for 2 days to work out with the running backs or the wide receivers. I know that Kazmir Allen is a terrific football player who can help at the next level, and there's some sort of indecision, if you will, or question as to where he's going to be playing at the next level. I thought that was a little bit interesting. I like Ryan Miller of Furman, the small school guy, a guy who's been incredibly productive the past 3 years. He played tight end, but he only goes about 6'1.5", 208 pounds, runs and plays in the low 4.5s. If you ever watch Furman, he's all over the place catching the football, was actually graded as a mid-day 3 choice coming into the season and had a good season. There were some guys who weren't invited to the combine who had high grades, but kind of fell off the cliff last year. Josh Vann of South Carolina, receivers, one of them. I thought Ryan Miller, especially coming from a small school and a guy whose position is kind of up in the air, it's not going to be a tight end. I like him as a receiver, maybe as an H-back. I was surprised that Ryan Miller of Furman didn't get an invitation.
All right, those are some good names there. Now let's talk about the guys that did get invited to the combine, Tony. And you can take these position groups any way you want, guys you're excited about, guys you're worried about, guys you have questions about, just, things that you'll be keeping an eye on. You want to start offense or defense? Where do you want to go first?
Let's go offense. Let's start with the quarterbacks.
Go ahead.
We've talked ad nauseum about the measurements of Bryce Young. I mean, that's going to be front and center. Obviously it's going to be later in the week, but how tall is he? How big is he? And, the measurements when they get on the stage and they're measured, it gives everybody a chance to look at the body types and say, is this guy going to be able to add 10 to 15 pounds onto his frame?
The frame is huge.
Yeah. Are we going to be able to get him stouter? If he adds 10 to 15 pounds, is he going to be able to play, or is he going to be just like, ripped height with muscles and he could be inflexible? That's huge for Bryce Young. We'll see the numbers that we'll see Bryce Young on the stage. I mean, for a guy like Will Levis, a guy like Anthony Richardson, even CJ Stroud, if they throw, this is critical. You have to remember, for the quarterbacks, the combine workout is they're throwing to receivers that they've never really thrown to in the past. And they're doing it in a place that they never played in the past. I mean, except for Aiden O'Connell, none of these guys have played in Lucas Oil Stadium. So it's foreign surroundings, throwing to receivers they haven't thrown to. Now you're going to have big crowds there because in the past it was just scouts and coaches and NFL people. Now they let fans in. Now they're letting the media in. So it's getting a little bit larger and larger. So it's a big deal in foreign surroundings for these guys. Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, even CJ Stroud. Can they hit receivers in stride? Are they making receivers slow up in routes, leave their feet to catch the pass, adjust backwards? You want to see that sort of tempo where you're leading receivers with the throws, which I'm sure Bryce Young will do with ease because he can do it with anybody, that guy. The big arm quarterbacks, the athletic quarterbacks, how are their passes? You're not just looking for completions. You're looking at, especially in shorts, in your underwear, shorts and t-shirt, making it easy for the receivers to catch the ball. Is the ball there when the receivers are leaving their routes? Are the receivers waiting for the ball to arrive to them? So that's going to be the interesting thing for the big name quarterbacks where there are a lot of question marks. The Will Levis's, Anthony Richardson's, and to a lesser extent, CJ Stroud.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that'll be interesting. Let's jump to running backs here, Tony. And in a very crowded running back group, I think this could be a little bit of a situation where guys might be able to separate themselves a little bit based on their 40 times and some of the agility drills where, teams might be looking for guys a little bit more upside. And I think that's where they look at some of these, physical traits. And, maybe if someone was in the same tier at the top of round 3, maybe someone gets bumped up to the, bottom of round 2, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a big day for Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears of Tulane, terrific season in 2022. 3 days of outstanding practice at the Senior Bowl as both catching the ball and running the ball. Now we got to see, is he as fast for the stopwatch as he looks on the field? Because we definitely know he's got great play speed. Does that time match? Is that 40 time match the play speed? Are those shuttle times? Is that 3-cone time as quick as his footwork looks on the field? Because if it is, you're basically seeing everything come together for Tyjae Spears, which could make him the third running back off the board, at the top of round 2 or in the middle of round 2. And people will start to dispel that, well, he's just a situational ball carrier. I think the same thing for Devin Achane of Texas A&M, incredibly creative, makes defenders miss, looks a little stouter on the inside than Tyjae Spears, has a burst, but how fast is he?
Remember, and I think, Tony, for him, isn't what he weighs in that pretty important, too? He was listed at like 180, right, in college or something like that?
Again, Tyjae Spears is 5'8", 193 pounds. You want to see if Achane is in that same sort of area, right? Because he is more of a creative, that third down back type. Here's the interesting thing. When we interviewed guys at the Shrine Game, we would ask them, what they measured in at. And then I'd ask them, is that your playing weight? Because these guys, what they weigh in at is not necessarily their playing weight. We saw it with Tyjae Spears. I think it was 193 at the Senior Bowl practices, and he played it that way. With Achane, if he comes in at 190, is that his actual playing weight? Right. So you got to be very careful about that. Little trick, what happens is these guys weigh in and they drink gallons and gallons of water to get their weight up. And then what was happening is by the time the workouts come, well, obviously they've excreted all that water. And the scouts try and get them back onto the scale before they work out to see what their true, if there's a difference or what their true workout weight is, because so many of these guys try to basically fill up on water to, if they can, add some extra weight when they get in for the official weigh-ins or the initial weigh-ins, which is why, and then scouts try and get them back on the scales. A lot of guys say, well, I weighed in once, I'm not getting back on the scale. So yeah, you're right with Achane and the measurements. Sean Tucker of Syracuse, he looks quick, he's got a burst, but what is his true 40 time? Chris Rodriguez of Kentucky, terrific interior runner, guy who picks up the tough yardage. Guy doesn't look great laterally. You're going to be looking at his shuttle times. If he runs them, you're going to be looking at his 3-cone times. I mean, that's part of the issue with waiting around all day. A lot of these guys, by the time they do the 40 and do the position drills, they're tired. They don't want to be doing the 3-cone and the shuttle. You look at last year's list. I mean, the amount of guys at each position who completed the full workout and did the shuttles and did the 3-cone was like 10%.
Yeah.
Compared to past years.
Yeah, almost nobody was doing the agility drills because those were like at 10 o'clock at night, and people are like, yeah, no, I'm out on that. Not happening. All right, let's jump to wide receiver here, Tony. And in a year where there are no superstar wide receivers, I'll say, no Jamar Chases, guys like that run around. I don't even think there's any Drake Londons or Garrett Wilsons, for example. I think these numbers for these wide receivers are going to be huge. Like, they're going to look at what Jordan Addison runs, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, and that's really, I think, going to go a long way, and their agility drills too, the 3-cone and the short shuttle, in how they might play out in that first round order, and maybe who might even, drop to the second round potentially.
Yeah, you got to remember, the combine is about expectations. You go to the combine and you meet or beat expectations, your draft stock is going to improve. If you don't live up to expectations, it's going to fall the other way. Think of, like stocks, if a company does better in their earnings than what the forecasters expect, their stock price goes up, right? If they don't do as good in their earnings, the stock price will go down. That's what the combine is largely about. Besides the medicals and the interviews, which is the most important part, it's about beating expectations. You mentioned Jordan Addison. I've talked to people who have seen him in training. He's going to come in about 6 foot tall, 175 to 180 pounds. He's going to run faster than expected, but he's not going to be super fast.
Only 175, huh? For him, that's interesting.
He's not going to be a low 4.3 guy. But the thing with Jordan Addison that you want to watch the agilities if he runs them. You want to watch the shuttle, and you want to watch the practice drills. You want to watch him run routes, because I'm told by people who watch him in training, his route running has been incredible. Somebody said, we've been doing this for 20 years. He's the best route runner we've seen.
Wow.
He quickly gets in and out of routes, sinks his hips, stays low on exit, catches the ball. So that's the thing with Jordan Addison. Obviously, Quentin Johnston, again, expect him to run fast, expect him to jump really high. Watch the drill session. Is he sinking his hips? Is he running routes with good footwork?
Is he catching it?
Is he staying low on exit? And as you said, John, is he extending his hands and catching the ball away from his frame? Zay Flowers told us he's going to run in the 4.3s at the Shrine game when we interviewed him. Can he do that? That's the one thing about Zay Flowers. Great route runner. We know he's a tremendous pass catcher, but is he a downfield threat? One guy I am very excited to see is Cedric Tillman of Tennessee. Everyone talks about Jalen Hyatt. Remember, Cedric Tillman was the #1 receiver at Tennessee coming in the season, got hurt. When you watch the film on Cedric Tillman, it's wow. Not only the way he catches the pass, his route running, his blocking, he plays the receiver position like a linebacker. Even when the play is away from him, he is attacking the defensive back off the line of scrimmage to intimidate him. Watch what he did to Kelee Ringo against Georgia this year. Watch what Cedric Tillman did to Cam Smith. I'm told you're probably going to get with Tillman. He's going to run faster than expected, which means he could get into the 4.3s. I'm told a vertical jump close to 40 inches, if not over 40 inches. I'm told a broad jump of over 11 feet. Those numbers all of a sudden make Cedric Tillman, in the top of that second tier of receivers with Kayshon Boutte, Josh Downs, maybe Zay Flowers if he falls out of round 1.
What do you think Smith-Njigba is going to run, Tony? That's another guy that I'm fascinated to see coming off that hamstring.
If I was a betting man right now, I'm going to say 4.48. Let's see how close I am. 4.48.
And by the way, 4.48 will be fine. That would be fine.
I'm going to tell you this. When his pro day comes in the middle of towards the end of March, I think the Ohio State pro day is March 21st. He'll probably run in the 4.3s. I reported from the Senior Bowl that he was just getting to 100%. He was just getting back into training. So the fact is, he's probably had about a month of training coming off that third degree hamstring issue, which was a major issue, to get back into training shape, if you will. So I think I'm looking at Smith-Njigba at about 4.48 right now. We'll see how close I am, but I think it's going to be much faster at pro day. It's always faster at pro day, but I think with Smith-Njigba, it's a legitimate excuse, if you will, because he's going to be 2+ months from being 100% from the return of the hamstring. I think one of the more interesting stories is Rashee Rice. I don't think Rashee Rice is going to run as fast as people think.
I think he'll be in the 4.5s. I got to be honest with you, Tony. I think he's going to be like a 4.54 type guy.
And, the part we're talking about the 40s and the workouts, the most important part of the combine, why the combine was really started, was for the medicals and then the interviews. Told there are some medical issues with a foot injury, a sesamoid injury, Rashee Rice. There are also some off the field issues that he's going to be questioned about. So I think it's going to be a situation with Rashee Rice, the way I think Cedric Tillman is going to really rise up boards. I think with Rashee Rice, it's going to be the opposite. You're going to see Rashee Rice really take a drop from the combine moving forward to draft day.
All right, let's go to tight ends, Tony. It's really become a traits position over the years. You look at Jelani Woods last year. His production at Virginia was, minimal. But then he shows up at the combine. He's 6'7", has an airplane-sized wingspan, runs – gosh, was he even like sub 4.5 in the 40, I think, right? He ran a ridiculous 40-yard dash at like 270 pounds. I imagine how these tight ends test, and for a guy like Musgrave, how the medicals look, to be quite frank, are going to go a long way to figure out which guy goes first and how many go in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. You start with Michael Mayer. How fast is Michael Mayer going to be? Is he going to run under 4.8? If Michael Mayer runs, say, a 4.74, that's a great time. And we're in the day and age where tight ends are, consistently running in the 4.5s, low 4.6s. Michael Mayer, 4.75. Darnell Washington of Georgia, who was massive, who, I had reported when he showed up for combine training 2 days after that national championship game, he was 280 pounds. They're hoping to get him down to 265. At 265, does Darnell Washington break a 4.85, in the 40? He doesn't look like he's faster than a 4.85 on film. Good player, tremendous blocker, good pass catcher a few yards off the line of scrimmage. But, a lot of people think of Darnell Washington as a top 45 pick. I don't see how you do it with a guy that big who can't run under 4.85. We'll see what he does. Very interested to see how fast Tucker Kraft runs. I mean, as I said, Tucker Kraft plays the tight end position like he's a receiver. We'll see if that speed on film match, or if the 40 time matches the speed that we see on film. Sam Laporta, another guy who I absolutely love. Going to be interested to see how fast he runs. You get later on down the line, your guy, Braden Willis, very quick, very explosive. I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but still, you want to see some speed from him. A guy who I like, who we've talked about before, Leonard Taylor of Cincinnati, very athletic, kind of played second fiddle to Josh Wiley at Cincinnati 2 years ago. And then this year was in a situation where the quarterback liked to throw the ball 30 yards downfield. They didn't use the tight ends, but he's an athletic guy who I think could help himself with some good testing numbers.
And I'll throw Dalton Kincaid in there too, right? For a guy that is a pass catcher more than anything else, if he puts in a poor 40 time, that could sink him. Yes, he has to run well if he wants to vault himself into that late first round conversation.
If in fact he runs it all.
Good point.
Forget what Jim Nagy told us when we did the Senior Bowl preview with him. Jim Nagy said Dalton Kincaid may not even work out at any time before the draft because of his injury. So, it'll be interesting to see if in fact he does work out at the combine. What does he do if he does anything at all?
All right, let's go to offensive line. I know measurement-wise, we want to see what Skoronski's arm length comes in at. I know that's kind of a big deal for what teams might consider him in terms of position. I'll throw Bergeron from Syracuse, another guy, see a guard or a tackle. We'll see where the arm length comes in. Cody Mock, another guy, arm length will be important. So those are the measurements out there, Tony. What other stuff are you keeping an eye on in terms of the offensive lineman?
Luke Whippler, one of my favorites, who I've talked about ad nauseum on this show. What are his size? What are his numbers? He's known as a zone blocking lineman. Zone blocking lineman, you want to see some athleticism. You want to see a guy who, can vertical jump close to 30 inches. You want to see a guy who's going to run the three cone in the high 7.7s. You don't want to see an 8.5 three cone time from a guy who's a zone blocker. So you want to see those numbers from Luke Whippler. Steve Avila, the big guy from TCU. You want to see the agility drills. You want to see the flexibility. You want to see during the drills with Steve Avila, even you could say O'Cyrus Torrence, how are they moving around the field? Are they moving around the field with ease? Are they smooth? Or are they all over the place? Are they out of whack and out of balance when they got to change direction? You don't want to see the latter. The former is a positive thing. Cody Mock, want to see him during the pass rush drills. How is his footwork? Jalen Duncan. Jalen Duncan, as we saw, was terrific at the Senior Bowl at left tackle, struggled at right tackle, but he's a very athletic guy on film. Now he's going to have to show those athletic numbers, because what you don't want is a guy like Jalen Duncan, who's a little bit undersized, 298 pounds, looks very athletic on film, and then goes and runs a 5.25 in the 40. The 40 doesn't mean too much, except it's a test of athleticism. You don't want to see him jump 27 inches in the vertical jump. You want to see him basically kind of live up to that athleticism that he shows on film, because it's going to be much easier to coach him at the next level, as opposed to a guy who looked athletic on film, but in real life really isn't a good athlete.
All right, let's go to defense here, Tony. Stay up front. Obviously, I think Jalen Carter and Will Anderson have pretty high thresholds. I think both of us believe they'll meet them. But I think what happens after those two guys, who are likely the first two defensive players off the board, though I've heard some people talk about Tyree Wilson there. I think that's a little crazy. But I think how that second group of defensive linemen and edge players kind of start to fall off the board will have a lot to do with how they do in these drills, especially that three-cone drill, which has turned out to be a pretty predictive drill when it comes to defensive ends and pass rushers.
You asked last show about Kalijah Kancey in the first round. I don't think he's not going to be a first rounder, but I'm told He's coming off a labrum injury on his shoulder. I'm told Cansey wants to run the 40 at the combine, and if he runs, he could get under 4.8 in the 40. I think that'll help him a little bit. It's not going to push him in the first round, but if the guy's got a labrum injury and he is, excuse the expression, hell bent on running the 40, and he runs the 40, he runs a good time, that's going to be something good for him. Keon White, very athletic guy, 280 pounds, out of Georgia Tech. Had a solid senior year, had a couple good days of practice, is on the cusp of being a first round pick. If he comes in at 280 pounds and he's able to run the 4.7s, he's able to have a good vertical jump. A good vertical jump for a guy like Keon White is anything over 30 inches. Then maybe teams will say, hey, yeah, listen, 6'4.5", 280 pounds, these athletic numbers, we're really going to coach the best out of them. So that's something to watch. Mazi Smith, the first show we did this season, we had Bruce Feldman on talking about Mazi Smith, who was number one on his freak list. What did he say? Under 7 seconds in the 3-cone? Could you imagine that? Most defensive backs, most safeties hope to go to the combine and run under 7 seconds. If you get Mazi Smith there at 320 pounds or whatever he's going to weigh, to run the 3-cone under 7 seconds, wow. That would be off the charts. That's going to be fun to watch. Will McDonald, does Will McDonald, does he do any work with the linebackers? That's what I want to see. We know he's athletic. I would expect a good 40 time in the 4.6s, but does Will McDonald go through position drills where he's asked to drop off the line in coverage, asked to move laterally? And how does he look when he does that? You got a lot of underclassmen, Mike Morris of Michigan, Gervon Dexter of Florida, Colby Wooden of Auburn. Remember, with these underclassmen, Lucas Van Ness of Iowa, these underclassmen, there are no true measurables on these underclassmen. Most of the seniors who were juniors in 2021 went through what's called timing day. Now it's junior measurement day, where the scouts will go in, height, weight, hand, arm, maybe give them a Wonderlic test. Very few of them run the 40 anymore, but they have a good idea how much these guys' true height and weight are. You have no idea about that with the underclassmen. So it's going to be interesting to see guys like Mike Morris, what are their measurements and how do they test?
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. I think it'll be very interesting to see how some of these guys do in the testing. All right, Tony, let's move to linebacker. Anybody there that you're really keeping your eye on? And if you want to include some edge guys here, you can, but I was thinking more kind of those off-ball guys. I know I've talked to some people, they think Trenton Simpson's going to have an absolutely unbelievable combine with his speed.
And he should, but the thing with Trenton Simpson is, how big is he? Is he 230 pounds? Is he 222? I could see Trenton Simpson running the 4.5s, verting 36 inches and having great 3-cone and great shuttles. But how big is he? And are you going to use him? Is he a traditional weak side linebacker in a 4-3? Is he an inside guy? What type of scheme versatility? I have an affection towards Jack Campbell. I think Jack Campbell is significantly underrated. People talk about his speed, his 40. Let's see. Jack Campbell's got to run relatively fast, and he's got to do well in the shows. The tape is there for Jack Campbell if you ever watch him. He's a forceful blitzer. He's a terrific run defender. He gets depth on his pass drops. He plays well in coverage. The athletic numbers got to be there to say, hey, yeah, this guy's the real deal. Same thing with Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders is talked about in a lot of circles as a potential first-round pick. I don't see it with Drew Sanders. Let's see what his 40 time is. Let's see what his shuttle times are. Let's see how he does in position drills when he's asked to drop 25, 30 yards back off the line of scrimmage and make plays when the ball's in the air. Is he loose in the hips? Can he transition? Is he fluid moving about the field? Later on down the line, Henry Totoa, what are his measurements? He is a lot of people question his athleticism. I don't agree with that because he looks fast on film. He's looked fast on film the past couple of years, but how big is he? Isaiah Foskey, is he going to be, is he just an edge rusher, or is he a guy that can use offense space? Because as we talked about, he didn't look that great as an edge rusher at the Senior Bowl. He was getting stymied at the point of attack. So a guy like Isaiah Foskey has got to show that at least he has the potential to be used off the line of scrimmage in space on those zone blitz type situations. Byron Young, another guy from Tennessee, highly rated. Very good making plays up the field, but in position drills, can he drop off the line and make plays when the ball's in the air?
Yeah, look, I think those are all really good names. I'm going to sprinkle in a fan question here, Tony, just because we're on linebackers. So a fan wants to know about DeMario Overshown, I believe out of Texas, correct? Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on what he might do at the combine and how you think he's going to fit in the NFL?
I think Overshown is one of those guys where he's not going to be a great tester, but he's an explosive football player. And we've seen a lot of that come out of Texas recently. The linebackers who run in the high 4.6s, low 4.7s, they're not Olympian type athletes, but they just play, like their hair's on fire. They're violent players. They're very aggressive, nasty players. I like Overshown. I think Overshown also has some scheme versatility. I don't think you have to pigeonhole him as a 4-3 strong side linebacker or a middle linebacker. I think he's got versatility to play a lot of different positions. I have him as a third-round pick. I'm not expecting anything great from Overshown at the combine. I think it's one of those guys where if he's got decent numbers, you got to look at the tape. And the tape is very explosive on DeMarvion Overshown.
All right, let's go to the cornerback position here, Tony. Obviously, the 40-yard dash can be overrated sometimes. It ain't overrated for cornerbacks. Teams care. You got to run with wide receivers. And in your mock that we did in our last episode, go check it out, folks, if you haven't looked at it yet and listened to the episode. You had 6 cornerbacks go in the first round of that mock draft. I got to imagine these 40 times are going to go a long way towards determining what order those guys are going to fall in.
And I think no 40 time is more important than that of Devin Witherspoon, because Devin Witherspoon, as I said, he's probably the most polished cornerback in this year's draft. He's the most skilled guy. He's got outstanding ball skills, but there's questions, if not concerns, about his deep speed. I mean, teams estimate him to be a 4.55 guy. If he's a 4.55 guy, he's probably a first round pick, but he's in the latter half of the first round. He's not, an early portion first round pick. If he gets under 4.5 or he runs into 4.4s, that's going to alleviate some of the concerns about his next level speed. The fact that he's not going to be trailing receivers 2 and 3 yards down the line of down the field because he can't stay with them step for step. So you want to see Devin Witherspoon's 40 time. You look at the cornerback class and all the top guys, whether it be Joey Porter, whether it be Cam Smith, Christian Gonzalez, DJ Turner, Deonte Banks, Eli Ricks, they're all underclassmen. So we're going to get a lot of information on these guys that our scouts are that they didn't have beforehand. Keep an eye on Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks, I'm told, is running in the low 4.3s. Could get under 4.3, could run in the high 4.2s. Don't know that's going to happen, especially for a guy that's, over 6 foot. The taller you are, the tougher it is, because that start is so difficult the way they have you all scrunched up in that position. But the fact is Deonte Banks looks fast on film. He is a good cornerback on film. And if all of a sudden those testing times, low 4.3s in the 40, a vertical jump that comes close to, if not higher than 40 inches, those testing times match the athleticism that we see on the field, you're going to watch Deonte Banks draft stock take off. I think I had him 24, 25 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Emmanuel Forbes. A lot of people love Emmanuel Forbes. The concern about Emmanuel Forbes is sort of the concern about Jordan Addison. He's a tall, thin guy who may not hold up at the next level. It's more of a concern for a cornerback than it is a receiver who can run underneath routes. How tall is Emmanuel Forbes? How big is he? How much does he weigh? How much does he run? And how does he look, in the position drills? If he's 190 pounds, and people are like, oh, okay, 5'11", 190 pounds, but he looks stiff in the position drills and he's stiff in the 3-column and show, that's not a good sign. That's not going to help him. So you got to keep an eye on the height and weight, the measurements for Forbes. I think Sidney Brown is going to be an interesting guy to watch. I mean, great great last 2 years at Illinois. Tremendous Senior Bowl. How fast is he? I mean, if Sidney Brown comes in at 213 pounds and runs in the 4.4s, after the Senior Bowl he had, granted I'm talking about a safety now, but I apologize for that, a safety who plays like a cornerback. Wow. I mean, Brown's just going to keep moving up draft boards.
Any other safeties you want to throw in there, Tone?
I'm very excited to see what Brian Branch does. I have Brian Branch very highly rated. I expect a real good workout for him. He looks very athletic on film. Later on down the line, as far as safeties are concerned, let me look at my board here real quick. Jordan Battle of Alabama, who's a real good safety, not more of a box safety, more of a downhill safety, but you want to see some decent times from him. Brandon Joseph, forgotten man. I mean, a couple of years ago when he was at Northwestern, people thought he was a first-round pick, moved to Notre Dame, had some moments, wasn't a consistent force, but a real good player. Corey Trice out of Purdue, we've spoken about him.
Yeah.
215 pounds. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? I know this. He's a darn good football player, a real good football player. If he can run in the low 4.5s at 215 pounds, I think that Corey Trice really cements himself as a late day 2 pick.
All right, Tony, you want to answer some questions here?
Let's try it.
All right, let's see. We got we have not gone over these with Tony, so I'm throwing these at him cold, folks. So this is always fun. At NY Fan 1987, Alex Earp. He was wondering about Justin Shorter, Penn State wide receiver, went to Florida, was a big prospect out of high school, local kid from the area. Tony, what do you know about him? And is he at the combine? And what are the expectations?
He is at the combine. I spoke with somebody yesterday about him, actually, him as well as the Liberty receiver. You know, I mean, he's a bigger guy, Justin Shorter. Let me pull him up here real quick. 6'3.5", 225 pounds. So he's a bigger receiver who shows some skills as a vertical wideout on film, had a decent 3 days of practice at the Shrine game. You know, I think with Shorter, you're probably looking, if he can get in the low 4.5s, I mean, that's a victory for him. Want to see if he's as big at the combine as he was at the Shrine game. You know, 225 pounds. What do you do with a guy like that? I mean, you know, 20 years ago, he's your ultimate possession receiver, you know, red zone threat. Is he an H-back? Is he a receiver? Do you put 10 pounds on him and turn him into a moved tight end? So it'll be interesting with Shorter. He is relatively athletic, although I don't think you're going to see any off-the-charts numbers.
All right, another question. This one comes in from, let's see, Nemesis Escotio. I'm not even going to try to do the full one here. Is Carrington Valentine going to be drafted earlier than projected, a cornerback out of Kentucky, Tony, because he's a good press corner, and your thoughts on him heading into the combine?
Well, I guess the first thing is, you know, you got to define earlier than expected. Where does he expect Valentine to be drafted? I mean, right now, I have Valentine as a 5th round choice. He's a taller, skinny guy. You know, he says press coverage. He's very aggressive. I don't know how he's going to hold up and press coverage because he looks like a thinner guy. Definitely he's got solid ball skills. But again, a guy like that, an underclassman corner, is going to have to run relatively well, and he's going to have to test well. He's going to have to show that athleticism. The worst thing you can do as an underclassman cornerback, especially, or a speed position, is, you know, go to the combine and lay a goose egg because, you know, you may be able to rebound from your pro day, at your pro day, but still, I mean, Carrington's going to have to run relatively well in the 4.4s. You know, you want to see a decent vertical jump, and you want to see how he does in the position drills. I do like Valentine off the film. I think he's got some upside, just doesn't have a big body of work.
At Kyle Vert 53, how far is the drop off, Tony, in this class? Like, at what point do you get to a spot in this draft where you stand there and then you start struggling finding guys? Is it deep in the you know, day 2, early day 3? Is it shallower at the top? How would you just kind of define kind of where the tiers are in this class?
Well, I guess if he's talking overall, I think when you are looking at after your top 10 or 11, there's a bit of a drop off. You know, I think when you get into the late, you know, most of your late first rounders let's put it this way. There are only 19 guys on my board with solid first round grades. So when you get into that second, the late bottom part of round 1, the bottom third of round 1, I mean, most of those guys are first rounders that also have second round grades because they're not that outstanding. I've got a lot of guys with second round grades. So you're going to get good depth in the second round at a bunch of different positions. Same thing with the third round. Third round looks really deep looking at my board here. Third round, I've got 109 guys with first, second, or third round grades, which probably means I've got about 35, 36 guys with third round grades on my board, considering I've only have 19 guys with solid first round grades.
All right, this one.
Now, let me say this also. And we talked about this with Jim Nagy a little bit. Remember, this year's draft is really thinned out because of so many seniors who decided to go back for a second senior season. And we talked about the quarterback position, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, all these guys that are going back. The hopes are next year, the draft can be loaded. If the senior guys who are seniors next year enter the draft rather than going back for a second senior season, and then you have all these other players who went back for a second senior season in the 2024 draft, What it means is you're going to get second round talent in the third round. You're going to get third round talent in day 3 of the draft. That's not the situation this year because so many players went back.
All right, let's go to Peter Mahler. He wants to know what your thoughts are on B.J. Ojulari. Seems to have great intangibles. Is he more of an edge rusher or an outside linebacker? Could he transition to off ball, or do you see him as more of a pure pass rusher?
Well, first thing is pure pass rusher is the priority in the NFL. Okay, you're not going to ask a guy to play off the ball if he can rush the passer because that's the greater priority. B.J. Ojulari can rush the passer. He's an exceptional pass rusher. He's a very athletic guy. So do I think he can be an off-the-ball linebacker? On occasion, if you're going to run a zone blitz, if you're going to basically mix something up where you run a blitz on the inside and you want Ojulari to drop off the line and stay with the tight end because you're running a blitz on the upside, on the inside, and there's no linebacker to cover that tight end. I think he can do it. Can he do it on an every down basis? I don't know that I'd want him to do it because you're going to take him out of the position of rushing the passer where he's so good. And that's such a higher priority when you play on Sunday football. It's a higher priority on Saturday football as well.
All right, Frank Buffone wants to know. He loves Zay Flowers. Thinks he can play inside and outside. Not the biggest, but a playmaker. So his question for you, why is he not the best receiver in this class?
Well, because there are better receivers. I mean, and Zay Flowers, has done very well. And he did a great job at Boston College last year for a Boston College offense that was in turmoil, if you will, had poor quarterback play, and he was the constant force. Why is he not number one? 5'9", 182 pounds. Let's see how fast he runs. I mean, he doesn't have Jalen Hyatt type of speed. He's not 6 foot tall like Jordan Addison. He doesn't have the off the charts measurables like Quentin Johnson. Smith Njigba is probably going to come in a shade under 6'1", a shade under 200 pounds, and his film from 2021 is outstanding. So when you look at Flowers, he is a good receiver, but it is easy to poke holes in different areas of his game. Regardless of whether he's the first receiver selected or he's the 5th or 6th receiver selected, you put him in the. I agree with the guy, with the gentleman who asked the question. You can put him in a variety of schemes and he'll be successful at the next level. Remember, the draft isn't the end; it's just the beginning. So if Zay Flowers is a second round pick, doesn't mean he's not going to be a real good NFL player.
A couple of here, Tony. Bill Kane wants to know, what round will you find the best value for wide receivers in this year's draft?
Good question. I like the second round. Let's hypothetically, Kayshon Boutte falls into the second round. Josh Downs of North Carolina.
Love
I mentioned Cedric Tillman, Tennessee. Jaden Reed of Michigan State. Nate Tank Dell is moving up draft boards. Could end up in the second round. And then you look at them. You got Cedric Tillman. It's going to be about 212, 215 pounds. A stouter, underneath intermediate receiver who I'm told is going to run faster than expected. You got if Zay Flowers falls in the second round, you got a guy who runs great pass routes. Tank Dell goes in the second round. You got a speedster who can score from any point on the field, whenever the ball's in his field. He's quick off the line of scrimmage. He runs great routes. You give him a little bit of space, he's gone. You got Jaden Reed, a guy who's fast, a guy who runs really good routes, and a guy who can also double as a return specialist. You got a mishmash of different types of receivers who I think could be quality number 2 receivers and maybe even develop into number 1 receivers. So there's good depth, say, in day 3, the latter part of day 3, but you're looking at more number 4, number 5 receivers at the next level. I think you can come out of round 2 with a real good productive receiver, guy who could probably produce as a rookie.
All right, we got one more general question. Then I got 2 Giant-specific ones, Tony, that I'll answer, and I'd like to get your take on it. Correct me where you think I'm going in the wrong direction there. But first, we got Forge 1953. What's the ceiling of Washington, the big tight end out of Georgia? Is he a first-round talent?
No. I mean, no. I just, again, go back to what I talked about in the tight end preview. I doubt he gets under 4.8 in the 40. I mean, and you watch the film, he's a big plotting tight end. I like him as a number 2 tight end. I don't know how or why you would draft a guy like that in the first round. He's a real good player, but he's got limitations. As we talked about, he's an offensive size tight end. I mean, he's got the wingspan and everything else of an offensive lineman, but he plays the tight end position, and he does it very good. But you're looking at a guy who, in my opinion, is a number two. You're not gonna ask him to catch the ball more than 10 yards off the line of scrimmage because you really can't get downfield. He's a dominant blocker. I mean, maybe you throw him the jump ball in the end zone and he comes away with it because he's so much tall. He's going to have a great wingspan. But, as far as measurables are concerned, as far as what teams want, he's not the guy that's going to sprint downfield 25, 30 yards and create the big plays, or is a threat to create the big plays every time they line up at the line of scrimmage.
All right, now 2 Giant questions, Tony. First one from Rob Ford. Wants to know if Kayvon Thibodeaux and Evan Neal were in this year's draft class. Are they drafted higher or lower than in 2022? They went 5 and 7 last year, if my memory serves me correctly. I believe they did. For me, I think Thibodeaux would probably be after Carter and Anderson in this class. He'd probably be the next defensive player off the board. And I think Neal is probably a little bit above Paris Johnson, I would think. I have not done a ton of work on Johnson yet. Tony, your thoughts on that?
I think Neal would be at least 5 or 6 slots, if not more, higher than Johnson. And then Johnson has on him. The reason Johnson's going to be drafted higher is because he's a left tackle. And people didn't know that Evan Neal was going to be able to play left tackle on Sunday. So the left tackle position is a priority. I mean, with Thibodeaux, if he was at 5 last year, he probably would have been great. Well, first of all, Thibodeaux was number 1 on my board last year. Okay. He was not my highest rated player. So looking at my board this year, I probably would have Jalen Carter graded higher. I'd have Will Anderson graded higher. Then Thibodeaux would have fit in. So Thibodeaux probably would have been my 3rd rated player, higher than Myles Murphy, higher than Brian Brise, higher than Brian Branch, higher than Tyree Wilson. So I think, he's asking where would he have been drafted? Tough to say. I will say that Thibodeaux would have been graded, lower on my board, only because we have 2 exceptional defensive talents at the top of this year's board.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that after those top 2 guys, Carter and Anderson, then Neal and Thibodeaux might be the next 2 guys gone in this year's draft class. I don't think that's out of the question. If you take the quarterbacks out of the equation, obviously. All right, final question.
Even the quarterback, even the quarterbacks. I mean, the quarterbacks are going to be selected because they're quarterbacks, not because they are that highly rated on draft boards.
Exactly. That's why I kind of pushed them aside. All right, final question. Martin Gennaro wants to know, John, should the Giants take a tight end in the first round or second round to complement Daniel Bellinger? It's interesting, and I think you don't know exactly what type of offense they want to run. My feeling is that they want to be an 11 personnel team, which in that case, do you pick a second tight end if you're not going to be in 12 a lot? And then I think you want to pick a guy that complements Bellinger, who's a good run blocker, can catch a little bit too. So then you're probably looking for more of that move or receiving tight end, maybe that Dalton Kincaid type, in which case I think he's probably more of that, early second round type of guy. So no, I don't think it's out of the question, especially if, you that Jordan Addison or Smith and Jigba and, Quentin Johnston aren't there when the Giants pick. When they do, which I think is a possibility. I just think this coaching staff, Tony, with Kafka and Dable, where they come from in Kansas City and Buffalo, I think they want to run 11 personnel. And when that's the case, I don't know if you want to spend a lot of draft capital on a second tight end after Bellinger had a real promising rookie year, even though I love the tight ends in this class, and I know you do too.
I think if a Musgrave is there, it's going to be very enticing because Musgrave can do what Bellinger can't do.
Right.
He can do what Kelsey can do. What Buffalo wanted to do, get down the field on a consistent basis as a big play threat at the tight end position. I happen to like Tucker Kraft, but I mean, even if you go later on in the draft, Brenton Strange, I have him as a 4th round pick, a little bit undeveloped from Penn State. But he has that sort of move tight end style of play. He's not a guy you're going to put on the line of scrimmage as a blocker. You're going to send him down the field. Josh Wiley, if he ever gets his game back on track, 2021 looked like a terrific downfield threat. We talked about Elijah Higgins from Stanford. Jim came on the show, Jim Nagy came on the show and said, no, he was going to be a wide receiver. And then you talked to him and Elijah Higgins said, yeah, a lot of teams are talking to me about being a move tight end, 232 pounds, and the way he plays, why not? Granted, Higgins is a work in progress. You're going to have to develop him at that position. But if you don't need him to come in and make an immediate impact, if he's there for you in the fourth, fifth round, you take him and you kind of spoon feed him into the offense, into the play, onto the field as he learns that position. So I think it would be enticing around one, but I think they'll have options later on, day two, especially day three, to get a guy that they can slowly bring around and be that sort of downfield threat at the tight end position.
Tony, enjoy the shrimp cocktail out in Indianapolis, my friend.
I'm actually a Weber Grill fan. I like going for the barbecue at Weber Grill. I'm not a big St. Elmo's guy.
I have not been to Weber Grill before. I'll have to make sure I head out there this year.
There you go. Absolutely.
All right. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmelk. This is draft season. Thanks for being with us, and we'll catch up with you from Indy next week.